the streaming. Starting to record. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yes.
So welcome to Encryption Day webinar. My name is Prasad Silva, President of the Internet Society of Sri Lanka. To tell you a little bit of ISOC, ISOC started about 10 years ago and engaging in a wide variety of initiatives in promoting internet, local language content, disability access issues on internet, and conducting awareness sessions on cybersecurity, online safety. So we are also conducting internet governance forum and discussing internet policy and regulatory issues. We are under the ISOC Global and receiving grants to carry out the projects and opportunities to participate on international events. You can find us on Facebook or in our website www.isoc.lk. I would urge to if you did not get the ISOC membership, you can actually get it. And so because you get to be part of the globally represented reputed volunteer organization. So let me introduce our guest speakers today. Nominee Gunasena. So Namini Gunasena is the cloud service specialist for the IFS Asia Pacific, Middle East and Africa region. He has worked at IFS for over 12 years in enterprise systems, implementation, support, integration and operational management roles. He holds a MBA, a UK qualified chartered engineer and a distinguished Toastmaster. He is a professional member of BCS, CSSL, and Chartered Institute of IT. Our next speaker is Asela Waidyalankara. Asela Waidyalankara has been a prominent personality in the sphere of cybersecurity, with over a decade of experience in progressive technology and digital strategy, garnering extensive qualifications in both the legal and technical arenas. Asela is a pioneer, trailblazer, and avant-garde in the information security marketplace. So I will now pass the floor to Namini to conduct the session. So please keep your microphones mute to avoid any disturbances. So you get a chance to ask questions at the end of the webinar. You can send your questions through the GoToMeeting chat throughout the sessions. So over to you, Namini.
Thank you, Prasad. So today, as we celebrate the Encryption Day 2021, let's start off by trying to understand what encryption really is, and then go a little bit deep into some of the topics associated with encryption today. Encryption. So what does encryption really mean if we really analyze the question? Encryption has been around for centuries, or almost over 1,000 years. Earliest records indicate that Julius Caesar used a form of encryption to send secret messages. So in very simple terms, encryption is simply encoding information, a process where plain text information, or the original information, which is in plain text, will be converted into a ciphertext, and only authorized people could decipher this ciphertext back into the plain text and access the original information. And this mechanism doesn't itself prevent interference of the transfer of information, but it denies anyone from any unauthorized party from understanding the information which is being sent. So here we can see a picture of the famous German Enigma machine, which was used during World War II to encrypt information sent by the German military over their radio channels. What is significant about this device is that it was considered a encryption that's unbreakable, and the Germans were supremely confident that the communication mechanisms they were using were unreadable to the enemy. But what they didn't know was that the British, with the help of the Polish Cipher Bureau, were able to crack this code, and they were able to decipher all German communication. And that itself, some historians believe, was one of the reasons why Germany lost the war. But more importantly to us, the machine the British built to break the code on a regular basis, because this code used configurations which were changed on a daily basis called the weather codes. To break these weather codes, the British built a device which they call the Bombard, which is the modern precursor to the modern computer. So this is where computing started. So encryption and computing goes hand in hand many years. In modern context, encryption hasn't really changed since the olden days, but where national security, where encryption played a major role in national security then, remains the same today. But now it is more important to us individuals as well, because we use the internet for a lot of things now, especially with the pandemic and with travel restrictions in place. We rely on the internet for almost everything. Therefore, we have a lot of information which is continuously passed through the internet. So therefore, encryption is very important now to secure these communication and ensure that those who use the internet are not exposed to any criminals or lose their data or even their identities online. So why do we really need encryption in our day-to-day lives? Well, simply speaking, we use it, or we really need it when we access the internet or access any sort of secure websites where we want to ensure that we don't share unnecessary we don't share information with any unnecessary parties. We need the encryption when we carry out our transactions online. We need it when we share pictures or videos or personal data into the cloud. We store it and then we share it. And also now we tend to rely heavily on internet-based communication mechanisms like GoToMeeting, Microsoft Teams, Zoom for our day-to-day communication and collaboration. And we need encryption to secure our identities so that our identities are not compromised or used by anyone for any criminal activities. So those are some of the examples where encryption is important to us in our day-to-day activities. When it comes to encryption, there are different encryption mechanisms. And today we are going to talk a little bit more about end-to-end encryption and how it works and why it's important to us. So what is end-to-end encryption? Well, simply putting it, end-to-end encryption ensures that information sent by a sender is encrypted and delivered to the intended recipient so that no one can access that information. No third party could access it, not even the service provider. So therefore, end-to-end encryption ideally creates a secure tunnel between the receiver and the sender and vice versa. Some of the examples for end-to-end encryption protocols which are being used are like pretty good privacy for emails, off-the-record messaging, which are being used by journalists to ensure that the confidential information they share, especially with their confidential sources, does not get compromised by governments or any criminal groups or any other interested parties. And now slowly we see that end-to-end encryption is being employed by mainstream services such as Apple's iMessenger, Telegram, and even WhatsApp is considering it. If you go to the simple mechanism of encryption, how it works is that in this particular case, Olivia, she wants to send a message to a friend, and when doing so, her clear text message, which she types in English or any other language, is encrypted using an encrypted mechanism into a ciphertext and sent. And at Marcus's end, it's a decryption mechanism decrypts it into clear text so that Marcus can read it. That's how encryption works in a very simple fashion. How it's implemented in a simple encryption mechanism is that there are two sets of keys, one public and one private key by both parties. So when Olivia wants to send a message, she uses Marcus's public key to encrypt a secret key and send it to him so that he can decrypt it with his private key. So once the key is shared, the secret key is shared, that could be used for the basis of their future encryption, encrypted communication. So in a very basic sense, this is how it works, encryption. But it's always under threat, as in the sense encryption in itself has certain challenges or threats which continuously becomes complicated. One of those, one of the chief among those is key ESCO, where the users would need to share the keys or store the keys for sharing purposes. So they need a trusted third-party location to do that. And sometimes these are not trustworthy or could be a potential weak point where these keys could get compromised and the entire chain of encryption breaks. Machine-in-the-middle attacks are quite common, where encrypted messages are intercepted, and these messages or the encryption ideally should protect in such a scenario, but then certain forms of encryption breaking mechanisms could compromise these messages, and the third parties could gain access to this information. A newer trend is ghost protocols. Ghost protocols are protocols which are inbuilt with the sole objective of ensuring that there is a backdoor to these encryption technologies, so that certain parties like government entities, intelligence agencies could access these encrypted communication. The logic here is that governments will not want encrypted communication which they cannot monitor. The argument is that for the sake of national security, to preventing crimes, they need to be able to access all such information. When it comes to end-to-end encryption or E2E encryption, it differs from other forms of encryption such as client-to-server encryption by means of creating a secure encryption throughout its communication channel. Because now, if we look at an traditional client-to-server encryption, you would have a trusted server which would act as an intermediary, or the application host which would connect the two communicating parties. And it will ensure that all communication which goes through out of these out of the trusted server is encrypted, so that encryption communication between individuals are encrypted. However, the data may not be encrypted within the server and could be exposed to the server authority, or it could be stored or cached in the server in a open text state, so that if the trusted server is compromised, this information might be breached. But in an end-to-end encryption protocol, if properly implemented, ensures that when the messages are sent from person A to person B, it's encrypted, and it stays encrypted through the trusted server as well, so that not even the service provider could view the information. And if the trusted server is compromised, still the data is not compromised because it remains encrypted. A popular protocol which is being used for E2E encryption today is Signal protocol, which is developed by the Open Whisper Systems. It's an open sourced encryption technology, and it was primarily designed and used for the messaging app called Signal, which is now quite popular, especially among groups who are very concerned about their privacy and information security. This protocol has also been used by the other messenger services as well. Facebook is considering using it for their Facebook Messenger app, and even WhatsApp has shown interest to use it as well. So we perhaps might see this protocol becoming an industry standard in the near future. However, end-to-end encryption on its own is not enough, because end-to-end encryption ensures that data in transit is encrypted, but it does not ensure that data is encrypted at rest or when it's not in transit. So therefore, data at rest needs to be encrypted at all times. Endpoints could be a point of vulnerability, so they need to be protected, and intermediaries need to be protected as well. Certain limitations with end-to-end encryption we see is that it's very complex in our modern communication channels. It's very difficult to identify or define endpoints, especially when we have large groups of individuals communicating and there is a lot of information that is being shared or passed through servers on a continuous basis. Some individuals may say that end-to-end encryption provides too much privacy, meaning that even government or intelligence agencies or law enforcement agencies can't crack the codes or crack the encryption and access the information, so that this becomes a platform for terrorist or criminal groups to communicate effectively and bypass these agencies. E2E encryption does not encrypt or mask metadata. What we mean by metadata is that even under end-to-end encryption, simply you can see who has sent the data, at what time it has been sent, and things such metadata is still visible. It's heavily dependent on endpoint security. That is, for example, the security on your mobile phone may define whether your data is compromised or not, even if you are using end-to-end encryption. And it's not future-proof, because with modern changes and developments, especially with quantum computing coming up, we may have the processing capabilities to perhaps break the encryption algorithms used for E2E encryption with simple brute force attacks in the near future. So the future is quite uncertain, but what we know is that, quoting Edward Snowden, the ex-CIA analyst, who revealed a lot of the NSA eavesdropping activities, had once said that encryption really works, and if properly implemented, these systems are one of the few things you can really rely on at the moment. So, end of the day, the question is, how do I use end-to-end encryption? Well, there are a few ways you can use it, and we'll go through a few of these in detail. End-to-end encryption is not a default in most messaging apps. If you take out your phone, you will see that you use multiple messaging apps. It could be WhatsApp, Viber, Facebook. If you are using Signal, of course, you can be sure that it has end-to-end encryption enabled. But if you're using the other ones, you need to ensure that first they provide end-to-end encryption. And if they do, well, you turn this on, because as I said earlier, this is not default. Therefore, most of these messaging apps require you to manually turn it on. Also, most of these messaging apps back up your data, as in your chat histories, your media files, into their cloud storage. Check if these cloud backups are encrypted, so that if these backups are compromised, they are safe because they're already encrypted. Turn on encryption on your devices, because remember earlier I mentioned data at rest needs to be encrypted. So therefore, you can use certain tools like Microsoft BitLocker, File Vault to encrypt the data in your devices with a standard encryption algorithms, and also regularly take backups of your data. Use strong passwords. Some of the best practices are to avoid common passwords, avoid personal information, use complicated passwords, use paraphrasers, and perhaps even password managers, which allows you to store the password so that you don't type them all the time. Keep your devices up to date. Updates help patch security flaws and vulnerabilities that may be detected from time to time. Software updates also protect your data, and it offers new features as well. You could use two-factor authentication as well, and as this is not a mandatory option, or it's not a default option in most cases, but now enterprises have opted for two-factor authentication as a mandatory means of authenticating end users. The difference here is that the traditional authentication mechanism, passwords, is a single-factor authentication. It's something you know. It could get compromised. Someone can steal your password through a keylogger, or a password storage could get compromised. In such a scenario, if you have two-factor authentication configured and you use a secondary factor, that is like if you're using a password and your phone as means of authentication, you're using a knowledge factor and a physical factor being the phone being in your physical control. This means that even if your password is compromised, the attacker will not be able to authenticate themselves because they don't have access to your phone. So it makes it harder for anyone to compromise your security. Remember to turn on erase data options in your devices. This could mean it could mean that when you're finished using your device at the end of life of the device, you erase all data before discarding it, so that no one can re-access the data which could exist in the device. At the same time, you can enable remote data erasing options, so that if your device is stolen or lost, you can remotely erase the data without any of it being compromised. Finally, we come back to another image of the Enigma machine. Why I came here is that I like to share a quote by the man who designed the first computer to crack this code, Alan Turing, who said, "Those who can imagine anything can create the impossible." So let us see what the future lies. So thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Namini. So I will let audience to raise questions at the end of this session. So let me pass this the presenter to Asela Waidyalankara. Asela would be our next speaker. So Asela, over to you.
Thank you, Prasad. Hang on, I'm going to try to figure this out. Please bear with me if I do botch this up. Is my screen visible?
Not yet.
No, it's not.
Okay. Yeah, it's visible.
Visible,
Yes,
no?
yes.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you, Namini, for that very interesting presentation. I think I've learned a lot also about it, especially about the Enigma machine. I'm a World War II buff myself, so I was really interested to pick up some of the few things that was mentioned there. Thank you very much for the Internet Society of Sri Lanka for inviting me to speak to you today. Unfortunately, my presentation will not be as fascinating and stimulating maybe as Namini's, but I'll do my best to make sure that you all are engaged. Today is a very important day in terms of cybersecurity, in terms of general personal security or digital security. It's Global Encryption Day. And I want to thank the Sri Lankan chapter of the Internet Society for coming forward, for stepping up to create the awareness for today, about encryption, and the efforts that it has made not only for today, but for the last 10 years or so, as Prasad mentioned, in order to make sure the message of a safe and secure internet is spread within Sri Lanka as well. So I thank the society for giving me the time to speak. When we look at what happened with the global pandemic, one thing is very clear. Everything is online now. So there are some sample services that I put here, but the point that I wanted to make and the point that we want to emphasize is that everything is online. So there are services that were traditionally not expected to be online, especially within a local setup like Sri Lanka, but suddenly because of the movement restrictions, because of the homebound isolation that we had to undergo because of COVID-19, a lot of the services either have gone online or part of their service offering, their supply chain, has been transferred online. So this is the change that we have seen within the past year or so, where even in Sri Lanka, services that we didn't expect, for example, like medicine delivery, has now gone online. Another example, the stock exchange. We have talk of a national digital ID coming in. The court system, which was rarely something that we see digitization or digital transformation being used. Now, I'm happy to say that the Supreme Court of Sri Lanka is conducting remote hearings and digital hearings. So these are very positive developments that had happened. We can always, thank in a way COVID-19. Unfortunately, it's a global pandemic. A lot of death and destruction has come. But one of the, positive changes that has happened is that there has been a shift towards digitization in this country and digital transformation, and the statistics also support that right now more and more Sri Lankans are coming online, and the people who are coming online are people maybe who are coming online for the first time. So coming back to the point of everything is online. Digitization has gone at light speed. Why do I say that? McKinsey, the global consultant company, has estimated around the world, on average, digital transformation, digitization has increased in around 5 years. So basically, whatever was supposed to be done in the 5 years happened within maybe the last year or so. If you take this region, the Asia Pacific region, the estimate is about 10 years. So what we see is a rapid shift in digitization. In fact, I had the opportunity last year to attend the Singapore FinTech Festival online. And I remember the Microsoft CEO Satya came on and he said Microsoft's plans, which were a 5-year plan, when the pandemic hit, they were completed in 5 months. So that is the kind of change, and that is the kind of transformation that has occurred because of the changes in how we work and how we manage our lives in the pandemic. So this is the point that I want to keep on harping on, because with this change, with this transformation, there are certain developments that have happened also in terms of security as well as crime. As our digital footprint, as our digitization, our digital transformation is increasing, so is cybercrime. Cyber criminals, as Interpol mentioned last year, cyber criminals are developing and boosting their attacks at an alarming pace, exploiting the fear and uncertainty which is caused by social anxiety, the COVID-19 situation, remote working environments to their advantage. And the WHO has seen, basically an organization that is there to help, has seen a 5-fold increase in their attacks. We've seen global ransomware incidents increase. Very recent example is the Colonial Pipeline hack, where you saw, because of that particular incident, 1/3 of the United States fuel supply was limited, and there were long fuel lines, something we Sri Lankans are used to, but maybe the Americans weren't. We saw long fuel lines in that country because the fuel lines were affected because of this particular attack. So we see as the threat landscape increases, as the digital lifestyle increases, as our digital footprints increase, the attacks also increase, because now for the attackers, for cyber criminals, it is a soft target, because you're no longer attacking a person sitting behind an enterprise security firewall and enterprise grade security. You are going after a person, an organization. Most likely most of those employees are now working from home. They're working on maybe their personal devices through an unsecure or unencrypted internet connection. And because of that, the threat is higher, the risk is higher, and the reward also for cyber criminals is higher. And this is where the World Economic Forum, they did a report in 2019. They identified in the next 10 years, what are the key risks and the impact of those risks for the next decade, so till 2030. So they consistently identified cyber attacks as number 5 and number 7 in their rankings, as something that will affect not only us as an individual country, but the entire global supply chains, and how the globe does business. So this is a very key aspect, and this is, mind you, this report was done pre-COVID-19 pandemic, and now we see whatever that has been said, given the previous slide I shared also, it has accelerated 5 to 10 years. So whatever the safeguards, whatever the discussions, the policy frameworks we were discussing, either we have to discuss it at a faster pace, or we have to sometimes put those controls in as soon as possible, because our plans, whatever we made today, are no longer valid and obsolete because of the pace in which digitization and digital transformation is happening. So one might ask, what are these cyber criminals going after? What is so important that they're considering these attacks, the rate of these attacks, the intensity of these attacks increasing? They're going after data. And just to give you an idea of how much you and me, I'm sure all of us, generate, I want to give you the stat of an internet minute. Within 1 minute of somebody using the internet, you can see how much data points, metadata, as Namini mentioned, so many indications and indicators about ourselves, our location, our device is shared. For anyone, obviously watching Netflix, 228,000 subscribers are watching. In LinkedIn, 9,000 odd connections are made, 69, about 700,000 stories are done. WhatsApp, TikTok, 5,000 downloads are done. This is all in a minute. 500 hours of content being uploaded a minute. So much of data being consumed and being generated. And this is what is the treasure that cyber criminals and people are going after. But one might ask, why? I mean, when you look at an individual, a person might say, yeah, but why go after my data? Why is it useful for somebody? When we have these discussions, I've always had
Hi, Namini, can you hear me? I think we lost the connection. Or like, I think he's online.
Yeah, I think there is a small lag there because Asela is connecting remotely. So I think we'll give a few seconds for him to reconnect.
Okay.
Probably a drop in signal.
Okay, maybe Asela can, Asela, if you want, you can, rejoin. So Namini, now, yeah, it's okay. So for the benefits of everyone's time, Namini, if you can just explain me about that data in REST. So, how in Sri Lankan context, the banks and, like government and, so how they use, that service to protect their, valuable data, especially banks and government.
Yes, Prasad. In terms of banks and financial institutions are heavily regulated industry. So the central bank defines the security parameters, the operation parameters in terms of IT associated with banking and finance very clearly. So therefore, I would think the banking sector and the finance sector are some of the most heavily fortified sectors in terms of data protection, apart from the telcos. They would use multiple mechanisms to protect the data. So one aspect is that they would use a tiered approach in terms of the protection. having multiple lines of defense, not just a single outer perimeter defense, but they would ensure they have multiple firewalls to protect the data flow and outflow, if and any they have. And at the same time, they would use segregation within their networks to ensure that different data groups or different applications are separated and only authorized persons could use these. And depending on the nature of the data, for example, operational data, it might be difficult to encrypt it because you are accessing it. This is an application database. Like, for example, the core banking system, which has the information of all the account holders, all the account information that is being constantly used. So certain applications could be encrypted so that the data can always be encrypted at rest. But sometimes due to performance reasons, you might not encrypt it, but it's a general practice that the storage mechanisms are encrypted. And then it would also be mandatory to encrypt the backups, because backups are generally considered one of those easy points of failures, because the backups would generally detach from the primary system and would be located in a secondary location for safekeeping. So it would these backups could be sent via physical means, like a person who's carrying the data backup to a different location, or through electronic means. So when these are being shifted, they need to be encrypted so that if these backups are lost, or someone accesses these backups at these locations, they can't access the information because it's encrypted. So that's where encryption at rest comes into play. Encrypting the backups and also encrypting the operational data if possible.
Okay, yeah. So thank you, Namini. Asela, are you back? Hello, Asela. I think we can see his slides are moving, but not. Okay. Asela, maybe you can maybe disconnect and rejoin, so that might solve the issue. So until that time, so till Asela join, we have a question from the pool, and it says, I'm interested to know what you think about the NRMA data loss issue. Namini, do you think you have information to ask?
Well, Prasad, and someone, it's a very difficult question, because in NRMA data loss was, well, naturally got the headlines in our media these days, and if anyone who was interested in computing was very curious to know what had happened. The details, the exact details, we really don't know, because it's an ongoing police investigation, and associated with an investigation there is a criminal case which is taking place in the courts. So therefore, only after the investigation is completed and this the information is made publicly available, we can really analyze and see what has really happened. But I would say this would be one of those scenarios where cloud computing would be brought into question, because we always believe when we upload data to cloud, it's secure. But we have to follow a certain due diligence when we upload data anywhere, whether we keep it on-prem in our own location or within our own premises, or if we are storing it in cloud in another service provider's location. It could be an international public cloud offering, like from Microsoft or Amazon or Google. But even then, we need to go through the details to see where the data is located, in which country, They might not give specifics, as in the sense it is located here in this data center, in this geographical location, or in this particular address. Certain service providers don't give that amount of information for different reasons, but at least they can say that the data is located in, say, Singapore, or in India, South India or North India. So they can give broad geographical details. So you have to make sure to see where the data is located and it's in compliance with your own privacy laws in your country. And you have to make sure what level of backup and data recovery options are available to you. So in any scenario, if the data is lost in the primary site, what capabilities of backups, or is there a disaster recovery site? How long would the disruption be? How long would it take to recover the data? What kind of data loss can you expect? These are information you need to sort of look into when you are considering cloud deployments. We have another question from someone. Prasad, shall I go into it, or
yeah, go ahead.
Asela? Okay. Do government, private organizations do technical assessments when choosing cloud solutions and their DR and business continuity processor? Yes, yes, indeed, because each organization has their different mandates. Certain organizations have regulatory compliance requirements. For example, as I said earlier, banks and financial institutions have specific regulations in terms of disaster recovery and business continuity, which is mandated by the central bank. Certain other organizations may have international compliance requirements. For example, if you are carrying out business with EU companies, you must follow GDPR, or the General Data Protection Regulation of the European Union. You have to be in compliance. So these regulations mandate the policies. So the data governance within each organization is mandated by all these considerations. So the context may differ from each organization, the value of data, the importance, but yes, each organization generally undertakes technical assessments based on these requirements, I would say.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Namini. Just trying to get hold of our speaker. I think he's having technical issues because I think he's joining from out of town. So he said that he has some connection issues. So we can still see that the slide deck is moving, but let's try to get. Okay, I think we have another question, Namini, if you want to get it. So until we sort out Asela.
Sure. Yeah, that's an interesting question, especially with ransomware attacks, which came about with WannaCry. There were certain incidences where certain data was compromised or encrypted and a payment demanded. But in most cases, what we see is that organizations don't really reveal information publicly. Perhaps they don't have to, or they don't want to, because of different reasons, for prestige reasons or for confidentiality reasons. So that if and when certain attacks have taken place, that those information is not made public. So we don't have quite like famous incidences like what happened with the British National Health Service, NHS, where WannaCry affected a large amount of computers in the system in NHS. But we don't have such major cases, but we may have had a few cases, but they are not they were not made public.
All right, thank you. So I think everyone else, like, if you want to, just speak, you can unmute your mic, and then you can speak, and you can ask questions. Asela, are you ready, or like, can you hear us? I think still not, right? Yeah. So try to get hold him, but not connected. So okay. I think Asir is having interest in slide deck. So the slide deck is moving, but the thing, so we need the supporting audience, like audio. So let me see if I can just hold on. Okay, so I let Asela, drop the call, so then he can rejoin. And Namini, would you mind then, because I think I saw several people join after after you talk a bit about your like presentation. Like, if you can just explain about that, how that assign first and then synchronize encryption work using the key. Do you have that
Yeah.
slide deck available, or you can? Yeah.
Yes, I do. Just give me a second. I will get that out. So, Prasad, you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, as I've mentioned earlier, like how encryption work is very simply in a simple context. If you say it works, you have the clear text. That is, in this particular case, Olivia wants to send Marcus a message, and so the messaging app she uses will convert the clear text, that is a message in English or in any other language she uses to type it. Using an encryption mechanism, it will convert it into ciphertext, and that will be shipped via the internet. And the decryption mechanism in Marcus's end will decrypt it and turn it into clear text, which he can read. How it would work? Oh, give me a second. My slide seems to be stuck. Oh, got it to work. Right. So for encryption to work, you need to have two keys, a public key and a private key. So the public key would be used by a person who wants to send information to you to encrypt the message. So you can decrypt it only using the private key which you have. So the public key can be shared. So that's why we call it the public key and the private key. So in this particular case, Olivia finds Marcus's public key, copies it into her device, and she generates a secret symmetrical key, encrypts it using Marcus's public key, and sends it to him. So he can then decrypt it using his private key, and he can then access this particular secret key which Olivia created, and this shared secret key can be used to encrypt all communication between them. So so this actually has two elements to it. First, you use a public encryption, a publicly available encryption mechanism to exchange a secret encryption key, which then could be used as a basis for future communication. So that it creates two layers of protection, so that even if one is compromised, the other remains uncompromised. So this is a basic, a very, very simple basic mechanism of encryption. Now, when, say, if you look at the encryption protocols, like say the Signal protocol used by the Signal apps for E2E encryption, that would be far more complicated because it would use multiple algorithms in a different context, but in more or less the same with a two-tiered approach.
So then, Namini, so you recommend now, so if you take WhatsApp and Signal, so the Signal would be the more secure mode of communication, right?
Yeah, that is what has because both are secure. It doesn't necessarily mean that WhatsApp is not secure, but the question is more towards privacy here, because now if you open up a WhatsApp message with a chat with someone, it will pop up. A message will pop up on top which will say that your communication is encrypted. So you can be sure that your communication will not be accessed by unauthorized third parties. But the question remains, now you're using a free service provided by WhatsApp. What does WhatsApp gain from this service, or how do they make the money? Now, we all know WhatsApp is owned by Facebook. So you might be surprised to see that if you chat on a particular topic, you will start getting advertisements on Facebook associated with that particular topic as well. It's not that you have a person there who's listening into your communication and then who's then pushing certain ads directed towards you. No, I mean, it could be a bit creepy to feel that, but it's more algorithmic based. So the WhatsApp messages which go through their servers would feed algorithms which would automatically generate ads or direct ads of a particular type towards you, so that way they could generate ad revenue, and that is how they make their money.
Okay, thanks, Namini. I think Asela is here. Asela, can you hear us?
I'm so sorry. I was I think for a good 2-3 minutes. I think I was talking to myself.
Oh, not a problem.
I don't know which part of the presentation, you left off. But if you're interested, I can of course wrap up quickly. Otherwise, I'm happy to take questions also.
No, you can actually, I think I think you have done, I think 2-3 slides. So maybe let me make you presenter, so you can start sharing your slide deck again.
Hold on. Let me see. Let me try not to make the same mistake I did last time.
Yeah, go up.
I hope, Prasad, at least you can.
You can see it now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Can you tell me which slide I stopped talking from?
Yeah, I think
this one.
Fake. Yeah, I think that's one.
Okay. All right. So very quickly, since I know encryption is under attack, there's an organization called Five Eyes. And basically this organization, not in a bad way, they've asked people like WhatsApp to have backdoor and to compromise on their security and encryption. So on a day like today, I think it's very important to highlight something like that. Basically, India has also joined this organization last year, and I just wanted to highlight that. But on the flip side, you have President Biden, who is going to the UN in his first maiden speech. He said that, in a nutshell, we are trying to make sure that our critical information is secure, our critical infrastructure, digital infrastructure is secure from cyber attacks. So on one hand, they're asking tech companies and messaging applications to weaken their security. On the other hand, including the other world leaders also in the G7 summit, they are asking for enhanced data and enhanced security. So Raulai Kandai dekam illana wage situation I can see here. The Internet Society has made a very important observation in their 2020 Impact Assessment Report. I just want to highlight that part. While governments and law enforcement agencies continue to call for backdoor access, which is what organizations like Five Eyes are doing, we issued policy recommendation urging lawmakers and network operators to protect the trustworthiness of the Internet. I think that's very important because the Internet, not only for governments, for the entire globe, for citizens, non-profits, it does a lot of work. There's a lot of commerce, there's a lot of good things that happen, and the entire world's backbone is on the Internet. So it is in all of our best interest to make sure that the Internet is secure. Finally, encryption, people say, is about secrecy, but actually it's about safety. So I think that's something we need to encourage on Global Encryption Day as today, that it is not that people have something to hide, or maybe there is a privacy-centric approach as well. But encryption is about ensuring that everyone's safety is there. As you can see, otherwise, like the Western countries, they might ask to weaken, but they themselves will suffer from the ramifications of that. For everyone joining in, the advocacy part is very important. Please ensure that you create awareness among your peers, your friends, your colleagues, the laymen, because I think that's important. A lot of, not the tech community now is using internet services, it's the non-tech laymen. And I think it's very important for us to create the advocacy. I have shared 2 hashtags here that you can use, which is 2 hashtags that I use to create awareness, but you are more than welcome to do it your own way and to create awareness about privacy. So with that, I'm going to wrap up my presentation. I hope you found it interesting. You can find me online to even have a further discussion on this. I do apologize for the initial mess up from my end, and I hope it didn't disrupt the proceedings too much.
All right. Thank you, Asela. I think so. Now the questions time. I think so. Let me start with one question to Asela. Asela, now, as there now in the push in SL for the digitized government services rapidly, do you feel there is enough emphasis on data privacy and encryption on those digitized services?
Thank you, Prasad. That's a very important question to ask. I feel the emphasis that we are making on digitization, to digitize, we are doing it too fast without looking at, and I'm sure Namini can also weigh in on this, we are not looking at the security infrastructure, we are not considering maybe the operational infrastructure, we are not considering perhaps the privacy and cybersecurity implications, we are just launching the systems. And we see this a lot. I don't need to, I'm sure if you watch the news, you can see examples of this, where we launch e-government systems. There is a big ceremony, the minister comes, no problem, it's good. But as and when it continues to go along, there are issues in terms of either the privacy, the security, or the operations. So which is why we always advocate, I always advocate that when you're designing these systems, when you're having this security from the ground up, privacy from the ground up, and to also have an emphasis on how you're going to operationalize this in terms of the other aspects as well. So it's not about just doing a project and having a launch day, especially when it comes to e-government. It's about focusing on the other stuff as well. I hope I gave a clear answer for you.
Thank you, Asela. Hey, audience, it's your chance to ask question. You can, use the chat feature in GoToMeeting, so you can, send your, chats, or you can, feel free to unmute your microphone and then ask questions. So we have very knowledgeable gentlemen here, so you can, ask questions. Okay, so still someone is coming up with a question, so I can ask another question. From Asela, now does Sri Lanka have enough policy frameworks to encourage data privacy and encryption? You're on mute. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Policy frameworks are lacking. You see, there are organizations that at an organization's level, they implement privacy recommendations or security policies. But that's because they are doing sometimes global business. They are servicing global clients. For example, if they're dealing with Europe, they have to be GDPR compliant if you're handling or processing that data. So because of that, they have mandated themselves and got certified. We see a lot of listed companies have at least ISO 27000 or some type of certification, but it's not enough. I wish there was a bigger push. I know because myself, I'm involved in we were involved in a few rounds of the data privacy bill, the drafting committee, as well as in the industry related sectors. We had the chance to share our thoughts also, which is a different discussion altogether. Prasad, maybe you can look at that. But the bill is coming. What we are told, it was coming in November. I don't know. Well, November is only a couple of weeks away, so we'll see if it comes in November. And we are told the data privacy bill will come into existence maybe in January. So if that does happen, then at least now Sri Lanka will have some sort of data privacy framework, national data privacy legislation. And actually this has been a factor that has prevented investments for also coming in, because high-tech tech investors won't come into a country where there's no privacy legislations, there's no baseline national privacy framework. So this is lacking, and because of that, not only from a privacy and a security point of view, from an investment point of view also, we are suffering. And I hope, given the discussions we had with the drafting committee, given the discussions we had with ICTA, I sincerely hope that this act reaches Parliament and gets approved at least at the beginning of next year.
So, Asela, now, how long this data privacy, draft is, coming? Is it like 1 year, 2 years, or like, and the next question is, now, are they are they consulting with, like a society like Internet Society, with to get like expert opinions? Because I know that people might give opinions in local context, but are there any discussions? Do you know that they have engaged with global experts on data privacy when drafting the bill?
So what I can do is, thank you, Prasad, for that question. What I can do is I will share with you the draft legislation, draft bill that I have. They have taken elements from GDPR mostly, and some of the Indian and Singaporean elements as well, and they've cobbled that together. This, to answer the first part of your question, this has not been going on for a year. If my memory serves correct, these discussions have been happening since 2017. So actually, I tracked this for quite a while now, and I have paper cuttings and various announcements that were made from 2018 onwards that this act is coming, this act is coming, this act is coming. So when I do see announcements, I take it with a pinch of salt. But I'm hopeful that it will come. To answer the second part of your question, right now, I have been, because I'm involved in SLASCOM as well, and I'm the person, SLASCOM has appointed me as the person to review the act, the data privacy bill from their point of view. So I've had the opportunity to participate in a few discussions, but I have unfortunately not seen, somebody like the Internet Society, which has a huge reservoir of information and knowledge on this subject, being involved. What I can do is, in my personal capacity, I'll make sure that when there is another discussion, that the Internet Society is involved and invited at least to share their views. There was another question you asked, was global experts' opinions taken? I believe somewhere in 2018, 2019, there was a UK expert that came in to give their inputs. And of course, if you look at the Act, they've taken heavily from GDPR, but certainly there's pros and cons in that. They talk a lot about encryption. The word encryption, pseudo-anonymization, all of that is used in the Act. But then, of course, the Act will create a data protection agency. So they say that although we say these things, the data protection agency will mandate the guidelines. So we don't know what those guidelines will look like. We don't know what sort of technical depth it would be. On the other hand, we have to think, because it's an Act, it won't just involve or be for IT companies. It will be for anyone storing data. So what we have to be conscious about is anyone who's, like, for example, if I run a gym and I have the membership information, that also is data and personal identifiable data. So how much an organization like that can, go into encryption, have a data protection officer, have a in-house data privacy program like ISO or GDPR or whatever, is questionable. So these are some of the questions that we have asked in the closed door sessions. How are we going to implement this? And there has been back and forth. We have given our observations on the Act as well, where we feel there are certain areas of improvement. One thing I can share is that the Act will come into force immediately upon, let's say, approval at Parliament. So then the question arises, and I think even Facebook through their Sri Lankan representatives had made the same point. Usually even GDPR, we saw there was a 3-year or 2-year gap given for organizations to prepare, because you can't just overnight become compliant to a national framework. So there was a time period that was given. We don't see, well, some of them, they have said, yes, we'll give you 2 years, although the Act is, going to be approved, we'll give you 2 years. But then there are some rights of data subjects that will come into effect immediately. So that's sort of a back and forth that is going on how it's going to be implemented. Another question I have is this data protection agency. It has a lot of powers. It has the power to fine an organization. I think 10 million rupees was the fine they're looking at per breach. So a lot of things, but a lot of gray areas, because it's very technical. And I'm curious how they're going to, how a national agency is going to go ahead and try to implement some of these things. So these are some of the observations. I'm sorry if I went into a different tangent, but I think it was important to share some of these things.
Right. Thank you very much, Asela. Now, I think I saw a question, Namini, on this chat. I think if someone asked, what's the complication of PayPal in Sri Lanka? Why do we need special permission? Like, do you know? Like, anyone can answer
that Prasad, PayPal. The permission is not a technical. It's not a technical question. It's more of a regulatory question or a limitation, because central bank, for certain reasons, regulatory reasons, have not allowed PayPal to remit monies into Sri Lanka. So I don't think there is any technical limitation there, because technology-wise, it's little different from other mechanisms like, say, credit card or card facilities like Visa, Master, or Amex. I mean, they operate. Cash is flowing both in and out of Sri Lanka on these platforms, and it has been for decades, I would say. But PayPal, I think the regulatory frameworks are not as strong, perhaps, as it is with, say, mainstream monetary channels like Master or Visa. So that is one of the reasons that's still limiting it in Sri Lanka.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Now,
Prasad, can I just add a few?
Right.
Can I just add one more point? Because just to add to what Namini said, I in fact had a discussion that was in 2019. I went to PayPal, had a discussion with PayPal Singapore office. So part of the point they are saying is the market is too small, Sri Lanka, and the legal and the policy, changes and the asks that we ask of them is very complex. So because of those two factors, they are not very hot on it. So it's up to us to engage with them. I know that it's a hot topic, but this is from just to share what PayPal thinks of it. This is the question that the answer that I got. And if you ask the central bank, what they always say is exchange control regulations. Namini was very clear. Yes, the Visa, Master credit cards, they are okay because they go through banks. PayPal doesn't have that. So the KYC part, the know your customer, and how the money flows in and out of the country. So central bank has an issue with that. So how do you reconcile these two is the problem, because we are asking so many complex reports and stuff from PayPal. PayPal doesn't want to do that because the market, if you take their global footprint, the market is very small for Sri Lanka, and they really don't want to customize a lot of their processes just for Sri Lanka. I hope, Namini, sorry, I just thought I had that point also because
you hit the nail on the head there, because you were very clear, and you gave the exact reason what the limitation here is, because for PayPal, as you say, it's not worth the effort. The market is not large enough for them to monetize it. So therefore, as you say, as you correctly say, it's not just it's not worth the effort for them, because as you rightly put it, Sri Lanka, our market is small, but if you take Singapore, population is lower than Sri Lanka, but then the market is huge. So for any sort of organization like PayPal or any sort of international company to break into Singapore, there is a huge incentive. But for Sri Lanka, if you look at the statistics, before the pandemic hit, our internet usage was around 30 to 32% of the population. That was our internet penetration. The State Minister of Digitization mentioned recently that that number has increased to 50%. And that could be the case because COVID-induced internet activity has increased perhaps the internet penetration to 50%. But still, the volume of transactions which take place in Sri Lanka compared to Singapore is far less. So therefore, it's not just PayPal. Any other international organization, you can call it Walmart or Amazon, for them to move into the street. Yes, to move into Sri Lanka, it doesn't make sense. And add to that, our regulatory frameworks are always complicated, and our taxation systems are extremely complicated. So it's not worth the effort. So it should be, as Asela rightly pointed out, it should be the other way around. We should entice them by simplifying our processes, our regulation, our compliance requirements, and entice them to come into the country, because that would really open up new avenues of e-commerce, which we could use to develop our economy.
All right. Yeah, thank you. So I can see another. So I think we have we have 5 minutes left. So another question now, what are the recognized payment gateways that Sri Lankan e-commerce site can use if a local company wants to sell globally?
That's a challenge, because that has been always one of the major challenges which prevented e-commerce companies, especially companies who wanted to break into the international market, because right now only option would be to utilize a banking portal, something like Master or Visa, or some card portal or a gateway. And to get that, you need to go through a bank, and the bank's criteria are very strict. You would have to be an established business for so many years and have so much transaction volumes. If you don't have a certain amount of transaction volumes, you have to pay a penalty or operating fee to the bank. So that those are the options which are currently available, and those make it difficult for these startups and small type enterprises from accessing. But one of the interesting ways which I have seen local companies use to bypass it is they use platforms like Alibaba to import to export a local produce like cinnamon or handicrafts or certain small industries, even gems perhaps. And what they claim is that they have the challenge of remitting the money which they have earned back to Sri Lanka through PayPal. Impossible. So Sri Lankans being Sri Lankans, we have found creative ways to work around that, but that is not in the best interest of the country, because these unofficial channels deprive a lot of tax revenue to the government. So in fact, by over-regulating, the government is in fact hurting its own self by reducing its tax revenues.
Yeah, so you mean that I can use Alibaba to sell spice and then get money deposit into my local bank account? Is it possible now or not?
Not through the, if I remember correctly, not through the direct channels, but they tend to use, like say, for example, you can still remit through your own accounts. So if the normal banking channels are utilized, that's fine. So most of the exporters tend to use this particular channel.
Okay.
Apart from unofficial ones, if there are any.
All right, thank you. So I think, let me see. And then one last question for Asela. As a citizen, what should I do to more aware of my personal data and its safeguards? So that's the final one, I promise.
Good question. We come from, I think it's a culture problem also. I spoke about this some time back also. We are not a culture that respects privacy. I'm sure if you're living in your house and there's a letter come to you and you live with your parents, they will slowly open the letter and give you. You have seen enough and more times. So we don't have a culture of privacy in this country. That is one. So privacy is not only for digital systems or IT. Privacy is a concept that we have to inculcate, and this has to start in school because as we progress and as we get more information on the web, on the digital media, we need to be conscious about our privacy and how we share information, what is the information we can share. So that awareness, that learning has to be taught. If you saw the example that I shared, basically that for the commercial bank one. Why? Because people actually responded to that post because, why shouldn't you? Because we're used to that. Somebody asks your opinion or something, they'll give that. So we don't have that type of culture. And another thing we have observed, this is a social thing, this is nothing to do with, again, IT, but, I have noticed that when people get into a relationship, especially these young guys, they share their social media passwords. So each person is aware of their own social media. The relationship goes south, then there's chaos that happens because they know each other's passwords, and there's so much of chaos. So we need to teach people about privacy, passwords, security, basic security, and I think Namini gave some very excellent points in his presentation on what you need to do. So that's a start, but I think we should start in schools. We should start young, because unfortunately or fortunately, the generation that's coming now, they're born with the iPad in their hand. This is a digital first generation. No longer, now we have seen a time pre-internet. Our childhood sometimes, of course, that may be because we are old, but our childhood, we didn't have the internet, and we grew into the internet with the dial-up and all of that. But the kids coming out now, they have access to high-speed internet if 5G is on the way. High-speed internet, always on internet, all the time. So you really need to make them understand and aware of how you use your data, how you share your data, what you share, what you don't share, privacy, security. Those are just like, we are teaching religion or language or anything else in school. This should be like taught in schools, like at a very, very young age, because the digital devices are being used very, very, and if you see, kids are using Zoom for their classes now, and small kids. So, but we are putting them in this digital environment without teaching them the basics. It's like giving a vehicle. You don't know what to do. You don't know how to maintain it. You don't know how to drive. You don't know what are the rules. You are just giving a vehicle. And this is exactly what we're doing. And that is the danger. So first we need to start with that. That is why we have to start small, at the very small age. And one thing I mentioned is a lot of new people are coming online. Namini also touched on that, given the spike that we see in usage of the internet. A lot of new people are coming on the internet, older people who have never used the internet and now using the internet. Again, they will be subject to scams and frauds because they are not aware. So we need to, as IT professionals, we have a duty to make sure our message, our awareness is in layman's language. I think a lot of time we do the mistake of assuming that, throwing a lot of technical jargon in. But I really like how Namini went with his presentation, and that's what's required. You just very simple, very direct, and clarity of the mind of why do you need these things, create a culture around it, and create the understanding around it. So if you do that, then hopefully we will get a little more mature in our digital literacy. Just like we like to boast that we are 98% or 99%, I don't know, literacy, but our digital literacy is very low. I think 32% or something like that. So digital literacy is not only using the device, how to use the device, what to use the device. So I think that's important.
All right.
I hope I answered your question.
Okay, yeah. So thanks a lot. I think we are now up to time now. So let me now maybe Namini or Asela, I think both. If you can share your contact, if needed, information through the chat. So if someone want to get in touch with you to further discuss, some of those aspects to get information, please share your information on the chat. So at that time, so then, so thanks for joining the call today. So yeah, I would like to thank Ashen, our co-host of Rotary Club, who supported us promoting this event and other administrative tasks. Also would like to thank our guest speakers took their time on delivering these valuable presentations and share their knowledge in this area. So I will upload this recording on our ISOC YouTube channel so that you can watch it again. So thank you very much, and then have a pleasant evening, and then so we can rejoin again on another webinar session. And then we do have, if you don't still have that ISOC membership, so go to www.isoc.lk and then click on the contact us, and then there's a link to become a member. So you have lots of opportunities in working to a multinational, like global organization, and then really good opportunities you can grab if you can join ISOC. Okay, so thanks a lot.
Thank you, Prasad. Thank you, Namini.
All right, then thanks
Thank you.
everyone. Yeah, I hope you get this the contact information. All right, thanks. Bye for now.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Bye bye.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.